No, it isn't. I'm glad to hear. However, the last week or so has been really interesting in that whether it was a phone call from my mum or it was a phone call from abroad who wanted to know what trouble I'd managed to get myself into now, I can reveal that the other Jeff Thompson, my namesake, is 5'5", culturally certainly doesn't look like me, but I would argue does an exceptional job for sport, soccer on the whole. He was the only English executive committee member that would have voted last week, and is very much an understated and quiet individual who goes about his work in a very quiet but influential way. He's come under a lot of criticism. I came under a lot of criticism, so I thought I'd better have something to say. Is that part of the work of the Youth Charter, well no, a major part of the Youth Charter work, and what you will have seen revealed last week, has had our input, although it be it from a distance. Someone said to me they may not have answered the exam question correctly. I think firstly we need to understand that this will have been our second attempt. The 2006 bid did not go at all well. I was involved in that bid. There was a decision to take a bit of a break from the bidding process, which saw South Africa, rightfully in my view, win the right to host the 2010 World Cup, which was hosted in South Africa this year, and saw the World Cup go to the African continent for the first time. And it was within that view that there would be a continental rotation of the event coming back to Europe, that England decided to, rightfully at the time, submit a 2018 candidacy bid. Within the recriminations, and there have been many in all the press who feel that there may have been a stitch-up or that FIFA is corrupt, that's not for me to say. I have a view, but I think the underlying and most important thing to note and remember is that ultimately FIFA have changed their policy in relation to what was rotation across the 5 continents. FIFA have also recognised that the game, the beautiful game, must be enjoyed by the global footballing community. That is why South Africa were awarded the 2010 World Cup, and I think that is why we have now seen Russia awarded the 2018 World Cup. It was quite clear that the Eastern European countries of Europe had never had the chance to host the World Cup. So that was the reasoning, I think, in what was a dramatic change of policy. And I think England failed to recognise that and arguably take some credit for actually helping shape FIFA's policy shift to the social and cultural power of football, as opposed to it just being enjoyed by the few. I think, again, England were not helped by the panorama expose that was done only days before the bid. It again chose to spotlight and allegedly reveal 2 to 3 corrupt FIFA officials. It's ironic that the African Confederation of Football president, Mr. Hayatu, was actually one of the only 2 votes that were afforded the England 2018 bid. There was also a very strong bid presence of Mr. Cameron, the current coalition government prime minister, David Beckham, the global footballing celebrity, and our future king in Prince William. They all had meetings with FIFA members, and up to 24 hours before, Mr. Cameron considered it to be a very strong position to be in, and that things were looking good. I remember in the 2000 Manchester Olympic bid, being in the same experience. Myself and Linford Christie were part of the presentation team, and I shook every single hand of what was over 80 to 90 IOC members, and they all looked me in the eye and gave me that assured look that the presentation was slick, well made, and that we were in with a good chance. We only secured 2 votes then, and ironically 24 hours earlier, the bid chairman, Sir Bob Scott, said we had over 27 votes. This is not an exact science, and more importantly, what do we expect IOC members, or what many people call as the FIFA mafia, supposed to do? It is a bidding process. It would have served no purpose to actually suggest that no votes would be given on what is a secret ballot. And I think England 2018 was somewhat naive. We have been bidding and hosting major games for over 20 years now. And I just think we had gone in thinking that, like 2006, when we secured the 2012 Olympics and Paralympics, is that a few meetings behind closed doors might do the trick. Obviously not in this case, and we can't win everything. United reflected English football's efforts in the social and human development through sport agenda that has now become a global movement that now sees the UN, the IOC and FIFA as the major sporting pastime now do a considerable amount of work as to how sport can make a real difference in the social and human development of lives, predominantly in the third world countries or developing world. As a result, even within the 2010 Soccer World Cup in South Africa, FIFA had announced their own Football for Good legacy initiative that would have seen education and health facilities built in each of the identified countries that would see ongoing effort build momentum, such of the type that we saw identified by Football United. I think, however, there was a slight mismatch in strategy, whereby pledging to help billions as a result of Football United, I think, was a little inconsiderate within the efforts currently taking place. I believe that England might have, at the same time, looked at what was currently out there and looked to add value to what was currently out there. I say that in that our 2012 Olympic pledge was made on education, health and diversity. And I think it might have been more prudent, strategic, and, albeit at the time unknown to the bid team, not a major convincing factor in securing votes. I think it would have helped coordinate and integrate the 2012 Paralympic and Olympic effort for the benefit of young people in this country and for the benefit of young people abroad. But I do think a new initiative, coupled with so many initiatives, might have seen critics suggesting we were just on another social and human development bandwagon, and the pledges could never be delivered, because if you make a pledge of assisting billions of people throughout the world, it might sound grand, but a lot more difficult in delivery. Eddie Afake, in my view, reflected the 18 years of work that the Youth Charter has delivered in Manchester, in Moss Side, where Eddie will have been exposed to and benefited from what I will cite now for the record, the Moss Side Amateur Reserves, that I believe were the symbolic spark of all things that are enjoyed in relation to soccer, football, and what it does in the social and human development of young lives and communities, locally, nationally, and internationally. The Moss Reserves was drawn from two gangs, the Doddington and the Gooch. All of the lessons learned, the visits by the Sasol Under-23 South Africa Olympic team, the Ghanaian Under-17 World Cup squad, winning side, were all as a result, back in the early 90s, of seeing how soccer could provide a vaccine and an antidote to what were then very, very violent times. Another milestone will have been the 1997 England-South African international, the first international played outside of Wembley, at Old Trafford, where for the first time an international soccer side went back on the streets. The South African international soccer side, Bafana, went to the streets of Moss Side, played five-a-side with boys who didn't go to school but went back that day, who decided they might turn their lives around, and at the same time saw a pre-match ceremony, the first of its kind at an international match, where a protocol was signed between the governments of South Africa and of Great Britain to see this type of work progress. So I think the impact cannot be understated. It was again reflected in the 2006 England World Cup bid, of which again we had a part to play. And even within the 2010 South Africa World Cup, we were there in Johannesburg. The England 2018 effort was in Cape Town, and I was in contact with my namesake Jeff Thompson, because the Youth Day celebrations on June 16th saw all of the football community globally represented, and the Youth Charter represented the 2018 bid effort. So there's lots of, I think, discussion, debate, recrimination, frustration, and even bitterness being expressed as to why England lost the bid. But I think in the presentation, and with Eddie Afake, he actually represents and reflects so many lives that have been changed, but certainly a considerable effort, socially and culturally, reflected in our effort in the Youth Charter, but more importantly, the young men who can still continue today to see through the Premier League's initiatives, Premiership for Good. There are so many initiatives, but they all should be credited to those young men who proved and demonstrated that with an opportunity to express their frustrations, they could make good. We never know, but I would say in Russia, as I listened not only to all the presentations, England's in particular, but more importantly listened to Mr. Putin, the former Russian president and current prime minister's very, very moving acceptance speech. He talked about the role of soccer during the Second World War in Leningrad as the only means of keeping hopes alive, but more importantly talking about what it meant now to Russia's youth. 23 million young people under the age of 15. That's a huge figure. And he talked about how football, our hosting the World Cup, would do so much to improve their quality of life, as well as improve, I think, Russia's attempts to bring their young people and their communities a lot further into the global community that we all belong to. I was very impressed by it, and if we're looking at the continued role of sport as a social and human vehicle of change, I think Russia could be no better place for us to see if that is still part of Russia's wish, intent and commitment. And don't forget the rest of the world of sporting community who recognise that sport has a role to play in building bridges of peace, tolerance and understanding. I think we should also not forget that Brazil are already demonstrating uniquely as an Olympic host city in Rio de Janeiro and as a World Cup host nation, the uniqueness and the ongoing justification, not only FIFA but the IOC, of this new social and ideal of policy in seeing how sport contributes to a better world. But Qatar, again, if it helps build bridges of better tolerance and understanding between Islam and Christianity, I think with the challenges we're currently employing, I would have thought Qatar was a very good choice. So I think we can't have it both ways. There is a global community. All world events, major or otherwise, are on rotation. But I would have said for the social and human development of the global community, for the improvement of two conflicting belief ideologies in Qatar, I think they are suitable venues of host nation and Russia by way of what I've already stated. What do you think? I mean, you're quite right. I think in the cold light of day, and I know in the last administration there were calls for football to be regulated, I think the Premier League reflects the global footballing community. And it was interesting to note that a number of players or former players that were involved in the respective bids, whether it was Ruud Gullit in Holland and Belgium's bid, or Spain and Portugal's bid, you know, it reflected Premiership players, but Arsene Wenger, a Frenchman, was supporting our efforts. So I think we were seeing what the global Premiership community felt about the beautiful game. Some of the more uglier aspects, I think, were reflected in the view that the Premiership is not popular in other footballing confederations because it is attracting all of that talent to one particular league because of the financial rewards. And that isn't popular within the FIFA family. So again, the non-popularity coupled with a massive investment of 17 million, I could think of a lot better ways in which we could use that money in order to improve the social grassroots and continued development of football in this country. Obviously, there will need to be a review of how the bid team could have got it so right or so wrong in their guesstimation of what they believed were certainly more votes than were originally envisaged and ultimately secured. But, you know, as I always say, bids are expensive businesses of operation and management in their activity. A lot of the work that the bid team put in it was an extraordinary effort. And, you know, one can only have some sympathy for the bid team by way of effort. But in such in such an austerity climate where resources are premium, I think we will have to look at how, why, what, who and when with regards to that simple fact. Jeff Thompson was an expected vote So in effect, we've spent 17 million for one vote. I do not think that is best value for money or effort best served.